Under the moon's unyielding gaze, a fevered knock echoed like a prayer unanswered, carving fate's first scar into the frozen night. Tamsin Vale stumbled through the whispering pines, her breath a ragged ghost in the biting wind. At 24, she had known exile's sting before, cast from her pack at 18 for a weakness no one could name, an Omega's frailty that bent but never broke. But this was different. This was death's cruel blade, twisted deeper by the fever that clawed at her veins, turning her blood to liquid fire. The village healers had turned her away, their eyes cold as the snowdrifts piling against their thresholds. No coin, no cure, they'd muttered, as if her life were a ledger balanced in red. Now, high in the Iron Spine Mountains, where the world ended in jagged peaks and endless white, she sought the last whisper of hope. The solitary healer who dwelled beyond the tree line, a figure of legend bound by oaths older than the stones. The wind howled like distant wolves, carrying the metallic tang of impending snow. Tamsin's boots sank into the drifts, each step a battle against the tremor in her limbs. Her cloak, threadbare and stiff with frost, offered no warmth. It was the same one she'd worn that fateful night months ago in a border town tavern where anonymity was currency. Desperation had driven her there too, fleeing a creditor's grip, seeking solace in shadows. A man, tall and shadowed, his touch both balm and blaze. No names exchanged, no promises made. Just a fleeting union under a harvest moon, raw and unspoken, that left her marked in ways she couldn't yet fathom. She pressed a hand to her side, where a faint ache pulsed beneath her ribs, unrelated to the fever, or so she'd told herself. The path narrowed, flanked by boulders etched with ancient runes, their edges glowing faintly silver in the moonlight. Tamsin paused, leaning against one, her vision blurring at the edges. The fever had started weeks ago, a slow burn after a skirmish with raiders who hunted Omegas like her for sport. She'd escaped with scratches and bruises, but something deeper had lodged in her blood. A poison, perhaps, or the curse of her wandering spirit. Dreams plagued her since, visions of glowing hands weaving light through darkness, of a moonlit scar blooming like a flower on her skin. Nonsense, she chided herself, shaking her head. What she needed was herbs, a poultice, anything to douse the fire raging within. Ahead, the healer's cabin emerged from the gloom, a sturdy silhouette of weathered timber and stone, smoke curling lazily from its chimney like a beckoning finger. Lantern light flickered through the cracks in the shutters, warm against the encroaching night. Tamsin's heart stuttered, a mix of relief and dread. Legends spoke of Aldrich Fenn, the alpha healer who had forsaken his pack's throne for solitude's vow. 39 winters old, they said, marked by a past of blood and loss, his hands capable of mending what war tore asunder. But he answered to no one, bound by sacred oaths to the goddess of the moon. No bonds, no legacies, only healing's solitary path. Would he turn her away as the others had? She raised her fist, knuckles raw from the cold, and knocked, 3 sharp raps that cut through the wind's lament. Silence followed, thick as the falling flakes now dusting her lashes. Then the door creaked open, spilling golden light onto the snow. A figure filled the frame, broad-shouldered and still, his presence a quiet storm. Aldrich Fenn's eyes, deep as mountain pools, met hers, and for a heartbeat the world narrowed to that gaze, steel gray, shadowed by the weight of unspoken burdens. Tamsin opened her mouth to plead, but the words caught like thorns. Recognition flickered in his expression, subtle as a shadow crossing the moon, gone before she could grasp it. Or was it her fever playing tricks? "Please," she managed, her voice a cracked whisper. "I'm burning from the inside. No coin, but I'll work. He stepped aside, gesturing her in without a word, his scent enveloping her, earthy sage and faint iron, like blood long dried. The door shut behind her, sealing out the wind's fury. Inside, the air was thick with the aroma of drying herbs and smoldering embers from a central hearth. Shelves lined the walls, laden with vials of shimmering liquids, bundles of roots twisted like ancient fingers, and tomes bound in faded leather. A fire crackled low, casting dancing shadows that made the room feel alive, watchful. "Sit," Aldrich said, his voice low and resonant. Carrying the timbre of northern winds, he moved with deliberate grace, no wasted motion, as if every gesture honored some invisible rite. Tamsin collapsed onto a worn bench, peeling back her sleeve to reveal the fever's rash, angry red lines snaking up her arm like veins of fire. He knelt before her, his large hands hovering, not yet touching. Up close, scars traced his forearms. Pale against tanned skin, remnants of battles fought in the name of mercy. "How long?" he asked, eyes tracing her face with clinical detachment, though something deeper stirred there, a ripple she couldn't name. "Weeks," she murmured, shivering as a gust rattled the shutters. Outside, the moon climbed higher, its light filtering through a narrow window, bathing the room in ethereal silver. As Aldrich reached for a mortar and pestle, Tamsin's gaze caught on a pendant at his throat, a silver crescent etched with healing runes, glinting like a promise. He ground herbs methodically, the scent of lavender and willow bark rising to soothe her frayed nerves. But as he applied the cool paste to her skin, a jolt passed between them, electric, instinctive. Tamsin's breath hitched, her blood singing in sudden harmony. Beneath her touch, the ache at her side warmed, not with pain, but with light. A faint glow seeped through her shirt, moonlight weaving into her flesh, awakening something dormant. Aldrich froze, his eyes widening fractionally. He pulled back, staring at the mark now visible on her skin, a healer's sigil, blooming like frost flowers under the lunar beam. The air thickened, charged with unspoken history. That night, months ago, in the tavern's haze, it crashed over her now, undeniable. He was the stranger, the one-night mate whose seed had lingered, binding them in ways vows and fevers alike couldn't sever. "You," he breathed, the word a confession and a curse. The fire popped, sending sparks upward, as the wind outside rose to a mournful wail, carrying echoes of pursuit from the valleys below. Enemies who coveted such marks, who would hunt them both to wield healing as a weapon. Tamsin's exile had led her here, to this door, but the true trial was just beginning, a dance of oaths and blood under the moon's indifferent watch. The fire's embers hissed like secrets half-revealed, casting Aldrich's face in flickering gold and shadow as he rose from his kneel, the healer's paste forgotten on the bench. Tamsin's skin still tingled where his fingers had brushed, the sigil on her side pulsing with a warmth that chased the fever's chill, yet ignited a deeper unease. She pulled her shirt down, covering the mark, a delicate spiral of silver veins like frost etching glass, born under that same harvest moon months ago. It wasn't just a scar, it was a claim, a bond forged in anonymity now demanding reckoning. Aldrich turned away, his broad back a wall of tension beneath the simple wool tunic, scarred arms flexing as he busied himself at the hearth, stirring the flames with an iron poker. The room, once a sanctuary of sense and silence, now thrummed with the weight of their shared silence. Outside, the wind clawed at the cabin's walls, carrying faint howls from the valleys. Wolves, or perhaps the echoes of those who pursued her. Creditors turned hunters, drawn by whispers of an Omega's hidden worth. Tamsin shivered, not from cold, but from the instinctual pull toward him, a magnetic tide she fought with every ragged breath. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally, his voice a low rumble laced with the gravel of restraint. He didn't face her, but his posture spoke volumes, shoulders squared against an invisible storm. "This place is for the broken who seek mending, not for complications." Tamsin's throat tightened, the fever's haze sharpening into clarity under the moon's silver intrusion through the window. She remembered him now in fragments, the tavern's dim glow, his hands steady and urgent on her fevered skin that night, not as healer, but as a man unraveling his own vows in a moment of raw need. No words then, only the press of bodies against despair, the moon witnessing what oaths forbade. "Complications?" she echoed, her voice steadier than she felt, rising to stand despite the wobble in her legs. The air between them crackled, scented with sage and the faint coppery hint of her own awakening blood. "You mean the mark? Or the night we pretended meant nothing?" He whirled then, eyes stormy as the peaks beyond, locking onto hers with an intensity that pinned her in place. Up close, the lines of his face told stories of loss. Crow's feet, etched by years of solitary vigil, a faint scar bisecting his brow like a crescent moon. At 39, Aldrich Fenn was no young alpha reveling in power. He was a king in exile from his own heart, bound by the goddess's decree to heal without attachment, to mend the realm's wounds while his own festered in guilt. A pack lost to plague, they said, under his watch, blood on his hands that no herb could cleanse. That night was a mistake, he growled, stepping closer, his scent enveloping her like a cloak, earthy and intoxicating. "A weakness I swore never to repeat. And you, fleeing debt's raiders, bring danger to my door, the mark. It changes nothing. I can't help you beyond tonight." But his words rang hollow, even to him. As he spoke, the sigil on her skin warmed again, responding to his proximity, a faint glow seeping through the fabric like moonlight on fresh snow. Tamsin's breath caught, her omega instincts warring with the pride that had kept her alive through exiles and scrapes. Fear coiled in her gut, not of him, but of the curiosity blooming amid it, the way his gaze lingered on her lips, then flicked away, denying the pull. She was no fragile thing to be pitied. She'd survived rejection from her birth pack, their dismissal of her useless visions as omega madness. Yet here, in this healer's den, vulnerability clawed at her resolve. "Then send me out to die," she challenged, chin lifting, though her voice trembled. "But we both know what this is. The moon chose us that night. It's choosing now." Aldrich's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking like a distant drum. He reached out, almost touching her arm, then withdrew as if burned. The fire leaped higher, shadows dancing across shelves of vials that glinted like stars trapped in glass. "The moon chooses nothing," he murmured, more to himself, his melancholy a palpable fog. "It's the goddess's will I follow, solitude for the greater good. Bonds fracture healers, they turn mercy into chains." Yet his eyes betrayed him, tracing the curve of her neck, the faint flush returning to her cheeks, not from fever, but from the instinctive harmony singing in her veins. He was Ferido. She saw it now. Wounded not by blade, but by the curse of his oath, fleeing the throne of his pack to atone in isolation. A sudden gust rattled the shutters, and with it came a sharper sound, the crunch of boots on snow, distant but closing. Tamsin's heart hammered, visions flashing unbidden, hands glowing with light, mending a fallen warrior under lunar fire, her own mark, the key. Raiders, creditors with blades, or worse, those who sought the realm's healers to bend to their wars, controlling life as a weapon. Aldrich's head snapped toward the window, his alpha senses sharpening, a low growl building in his chest. "They're coming for you," he said, voice edged with steel, "or for what you carry now." She nodded, the fear twisting into resolve. No time for denial. The connection, instinctive and raw, demanded action. He moved to a chest by the hearth, pulling free a cloak lined with furs and a dagger etched with runes, his own healer's blade, humming with latent power. "Stay close," he ordered, draping the cloak over her shoulders, his touch lingering a fraction too long, warmth seeping through the wool. Together, they slipped toward the back door, the cabin's sanctuary shifting to refugio amid peril. The wind howled louder, carrying the scent of pursuit, smoke and steel, as moonlight bathed their path in silver promise. Empathy flickered between them, fragile as the first thaw, binding stranger to mate in the face of shadows closing in. Tamsin glanced back at the fire's dying glow, the sigil on her skin a beacon, whispering of destinies intertwined. Aldrich's hand brushed hers in the dark, not pulling away this time as they stepped into the night, the mountains their shield and their trial. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments of the night they find you. The snow swallowed their footsteps like a conspirator's whisper, the Ironspine Mountains rising around them in jagged silhouettes under the moon's relentless vigil. Tamsin's breath came in sharp bursts, the fur-lined cloak Aldrich had thrust upon her a heavy comfort against the wind's knife-edge bite. His hand, calloused and steady, gripped hers, not as a lover's clasp, but a healer's anchor, pulling her through the shadowed underbrush where pines clawed at the sky like frozen sentinels. The sigil on her side throbbed with each stride, a silver pulse sinking to the rhythm of their flight, as if the moon itself urged them onward, weaving their fates into the night's tapestry. Behind them, the crunch of pursuit grew insistent, muffled by the thickening flurry but unmistakable. Boots on fresh powder, the low snarl of hounds scented with greed. Not mere creditors, Tamsin realized with a chill deeper than the frost. These were the realm's shadow hunters, those who trafficked in forbidden lore, seeking the marked to twist healing into dominion. Whispers from her exile days flooded back, packs ravaged by engineered plagues, alphas bending healers to their wars, turning mercy's gift into a blade. Her mark, awakened by lunar grace and that stolen night, was no mere accident. It was a beacon, drawing wolves to the flame. Aldrich moved like a specter of the peaks, his body honed by years of solitary treks, navigating the treacherous slope with an instinct born of survival. Yet she felt his turmoil in the tension of his grip, the way his gaze flicked back to her, assessing not just the path, but her endurance. At 39, he carried the weight of a crown he'd forsaken, guilt etched into every line of his frame like runes on ancient stone. The plague that had claimed his pack haunted him still, a failure of his healing, or so he believed, driving him to this vow of isolation. Now, this Omega at his side, marked by his own fleeting lapse, unraveled the threads of that oath, thread by fragile thread. They crested a ridge, the wind howling a dirge through the crags, carrying the metallic tang of blood from some distant skirmish below. Tamsin stumbled, her fever's remnants sapping her strength, but Aldrich caught her elbow, his touch igniting the sigil anew. Warmth bloomed through her veins, chasing the ache, mending the micro-tears of exhaustion in her muscles. She gasped, meeting his eyes, storm-gray depths flickering with reluctant wonder. "It's you," she murmured, the words slipping out amid the gale. "Your presence. It feeds it. The mark heals me through you." He shook his head, jaw set like carved granite, but didn't release her. "Not me. The goddesses weave. Don't romanticize what defies my vows." His voice was a low thunder, edged with the melancholy of a man who'd long buried desire beneath duty. Yet empathy stirred there, unbidden. A healer's instinct to protect, now laced with something personal, raw. He'd seen her that night not as a stranger, but as a mirror to his own hidden fractures. An Omega adrift, seeking solace in shadows, much like the Alpha who'd wandered into that tavern to escape his ghosts. The howl of hounds sharpened, closer now, slicing through the storm. Aldrich veered left, toward a cleft in the rock face half-veiled by icicles like jagged teeth. "There," he said, urgency threading his tone. They slipped into the narrow fissure, the world narrowing to damp stone and the echo of dripping meltwater. He pressed her against the inner wall, his body shielding hers as he drew the rune-etched dagger, its blade catching the moonlight in a prismatic gleam. The space was a natural alcove, a forgotten hollow carved by ancient glaciers, scented with moss and the faint mineral bite of earth. No fire here, only the moon's pale shaft piercing the overhang, bathing them in silver that made the sigil on Tamsin's skin shimmer like liquid starlight. She leaned into the cool rock, heart pounding a frantic tattoo, the air between them thick with shared breath, his steady, hers ragged. The pursuit passed perilously close. Shadows flitted across the entrance. The hounds' whines, turning to frustrated bays as the storm swallowed their trail. Aldrich's free hand hovered near her side, not touching, but close enough that the mark responded, its glow intensifying, threads of light weaving from her flesh to his fingertips. A vision assailed her then, unbidden and vivid, his hands scarred and sure, staunching blood on a battlefield under a blood moon, but failing his kin, the plague's shadow claiming them while he raged against impotence. Not failure, the mark whispered in her mind, redemption deferred, now offered through her. Tamsin's hand covered his, guiding it to the sigil. The contact was electric, a surge of empathy flooding her, his guilt a heavy shroud, her rejection a mirror of isolation. "You think solitude absolves you?" she said softly, her voice cutting the alcove's hush like a blade through silk. "But hiding from bonds, it's just another exile, like mine, cast out for dreams no one believed, debts chaining what freedom I clawed." Tears pricked her eyes, not from cold, but the visceral ache of connection, the wind outside moaning like a lover's lament. Aldrich's breath hitched, his thumb tracing the sigil's edge with feather-light reverence, the glow illuminating the conflict in his face. "Mercy demands sacrifice, Tamsin. My oath, it's the chain that keeps me whole. For the realm." But his words faltered, the alpha in him warring with the man, curiosity yielding to a deeper pull. The hounds baying faded into the gale, the immediate threat receding, leaving only the intimacy of their refuge. He didn't withdraw. Instead, his forehead rested against hers, a moment of surrender amid the stone's unyielding embrace. The mark hummed, binding their pains, hers of wandering rejection, his of dutiful loss, into a tentative knot of understanding. Outside, the storm raged on, snow veiling their sanctuary in white silence, but within, empathy kindled like embers in frost. Tamsin's fear ebbed, replaced by the quiet fire of alliance, her curiosity blooming into trust. Aldrich's scent enveloped her, sage and iron, a promise of protection forged in moonlight. Yet the night whispered warnings. Enemies would return, drawn by the mark's power, forcing choices that could shatter vows or seal destinies. For now, in this cleft of stone and shadow, they breathed as one, the moon bearing witness to the bond's fragile birth. The alcove's chill seeped into Tamsin's bones like an old betrayal, the stone wall pressing against her back, a reminder of how fragile sanctuary could be. Moonlight slanted through the fissure above, a silver blade slicing the darkness, illuminating Aldrich's face inches from hers, his breath mingling with the damp air, warm and laced with the faint bitterness of unspoken regrets. The sigil on her side hummed steadily now, not the erratic pulse of fear, but a rhythmic throb, as if drawing power from the lunar glow that painted their refuge in ethereal strokes. Outside, the storm's fury had softened to a mournful sigh, snowflakes drifting like ash from a dying fire, veiling the world in hushed white. Yet the hound's distant echoes lingered in her mind, a prelude to greater shadows, those who sought to chain the moon's gifts for their thrones of blood. Aldrich's forehead still rested against hers, a tentative bridge across the chasm of their isolations, his scarred hand lingering over the sigil through her shirt. The contact sent tendrils of light snaking up her veins, chasing away the last vestiges of fever. But it did more. It stirred something deeper, a wellspring long buried beneath layers of rejection and survival. Tamsin closed her eyes, the visions assaulting her again, sharper now, unfiltered by delirium. Not fragments, but a cascade. Hands, hers, glowing with inner fire, weaving through ravaged flesh on a field of ice-crusted snow, staunching wounds that no herb could touch. Blood steaming in the cold, Weavos rising in gratitude, a pack reborn under her touch. But at the center, Aldrich, his body broken not by blade, but by the plague's invisible venom. His gray eyes pleading as she poured light into the void that had claimed his kin. She gasped, pulling back slightly, her heart slamming against her ribs like a caged wolf. The sigil flared brighter, its silver veins spreading across her abdomen, visible even through the wool, casting flickering patterns on the alcove walls like runes awakening. "It's not just healing," she whispered, her voice raw, threaded with awe and terror. "It's seeing, feeling the breaks in others, the ones hidden in blood and bone." The words tumbled out, born from the mark's insistence, the moon's light amplifying what her Omega blood had always whispered but never named, a pathfinder's gift, not for wandering trails, but for mending souls fractured by fate. Rejected by her pack for mad dreams, she'd dismissed them as weakness. Now, they bloomed into power, lunar and unyielding. Aldrich's eyes widened, the storm in them shifting from conflict to revelation, his hand pressing fully against the sigil now, as if to anchor the surge. Warmth flooded between them, not just hers healing his subtle aches, the old scar on his palm from a thorned ritual, the deeper knot of grief in his chest, but a reciprocity, her visions bleeding into his mind. He stiffened, a low rumble escaping his throat, not growl but wonder laced with pain. Flashes crossed his features, the plague's grip on his pack, bodies writhing in fevered agony under a harvest moon, much like this one, his hands futile against the tide, oaths forged in the aftermath, to forsake all bonds that might dilute his solitary mercy. But now, through her, he saw the truth. The plague not mere sickness, but a curse woven by rival alphas, shadows in the realm's underbelly who poisoned wells to topple healers like him, claiming power over life itself. "You," he breathed, the word a fracture in his resolve, his voice cracking like ice underfoot. He drew back just enough to search her face, the moonlight etching silver highlights in his dark hair, turning his scars into maps of battles yet to be won. At 39, Aldrich had built walls of duty around his guilt, believing solitude the only path to redemption. But Tamsin's mark revealed the lie. She was the key, the Omega, whose hidden gift could unravel the curses he'd failed to cure, not through herbs alone, but through the bond they'd forged in that anonymous night. The moon had chosen, marking her as his counterpoint, a healer unbound by vows, her empathy a blade against the darkness that hunted them. The sigil. It's awakening what the goddess intended. Your blood sings with it, Tamsin. It mends what I couldn't. Tears traced cold paths down her cheeks, the wind outside whispering through the cleft like a goddess's sigh, carrying the scent of pine resin and distant smoke, perhaps a campfire of pursuers regrouping in the valleys. The revelation settled heavy in her chest, a rebirth amid the stone's chill, no longer just an exile fleeing debts and fever, but a vessel for something greater, her rejection the forge that tempered this power. Yet doubt coiled beneath the awe. What strength was this? If it demanded she bind to him, shattering his oath and drawing the realm's wolves to their door? Her hand covered his, the glow between them pulsing like a shared heartbeat, visceral and intimate, the air thick with the earthy tang of awakened magic and the faint metallic hint of blood from some unseen wound in the night. Aldrich's melancholy deepened. his free hand cupping her jaw with a gentleness that belied his alpha strength, thumb brushing away her tear, the touch igniting sparks along her skin. "This changes everything," he murmured, his gaze locking onto hers, steel-gray depths reflecting the moon's unblinking eye. The hunters below, they sense it already, the marks call. It's not just your survival at stake, it's the realms, my past, the plague that broke me. You could end it, weave the cure through us. But his words carried the weight of ethical torment, the vow's chains tightening even as desire and destiny pulled him toward her. To embrace this was to forsake solitude, to risk turning mercy into possession. To deny it was to doom them both to shadows. Tamsin leaned into his palm, the sigil's light fading to a soft ember, leaving them in the alcove's intimate gloom, breaths sinking amid the drip of melting ice. The wind howled a single piercing note, as if the moon itself questioned their next step, love as redemption or the tragedy of oaths unbroken. Her heart ached with the dilemma, spiritual and raw. Was she the cure he needed, or the fracture that would finally claim him? Outside, the snow fell thicker, burying paths and secrets alike. But within, the revelation hung like a blade, poised to fall. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw your... The moon hung bloated and crimson over the Ironspine crags, its light bleeding into the snow like spilled wine, staining the world in hues of warning and wrath. Tamsin emerged from the alcove's throat, with Aldrich at her side, the sigil on her skin a dormant ember now, waiting for the spark of trial. The storm had broken, leaving a brittle silence broken only by the crunch of their boots on the refrozen crust, each step echoing like a judgment from the peaks. Her breath fogged the air, sharp with the scent of pine sap and the underlying rot of distant decay, plague's ghost or the hunter's torches smoldering in the valleys. The revelation in the stone hollow clung to her like frost. Her gift, awakened, a pathfinder's light not for lost trails, but for unraveling curses woven in shadow. Yet it bound her tighter to him, this alpha whose vows she now threatened, his guilt a mirror to her own fractured exile. They descended a narrow defile, the path slick with melt and treacherous, flanked by boulders that loomed like silent witnesses. Aldrich's presence was a steady heat at her back, his dagger sheathed but ready, the runes along its hilt pulsing faintly in sync with her mark. No words passed between them since the alcove's intimacy. The air thrummed with unspoken fractures, his oath versus the moon's decree, her freedom versus the pull of destiny. Tamsin's mind raced, visions flickering at the edges, not just his past, but fragments of her own, the pack that had cast her out at 18, deeming her Omega dreams a curse rather than a call. Debts had chained her since, but this mark promised liberation or enslavement to a larger war. A low growl rippled through the night, not wind but beast, hounds loosed anew, their baying a chorus of avarice slicing the chill. Aldrich tensed, his hand finding her arm, guiding her behind an outcrop veined with quartz that gleamed like exposed bone. "They're hurting us," he murmured, voice a gravel whisper, eyes scanning the moonlit slope below. Shadows stirred there, not beasts alone, but figures cloaked in black fur and steel. 5, perhaps 6, moving with predatory grace. At their lead, a silhouette broader than the rest, armored in plates etched with rival pack sigils, the snarling wolf of House Draven, alphas who'd risen on the bones of the plagued, twisting healing into their arsenal of control. Tamsin's pulse thundered, the sigil warming as fear ignited it, threads of light seeping through her cloak like veins of silver fire. She pressed against the rock, the cold biting her palms, grounding the surge. Among the hunters, a face emerged in her vision. Unbidden, the mark's gift unveiling truths. Eric Draven, the rival alpha, 35 and ruthless, his own scars a testament to battles won through poison and ploy. He'd been the shadow behind Aldrich's plague, not mere opportunist, but architect, lacing wells with curse root to fell the fen pack, claiming their lands and hoarding healers like trophies. Eric's eyes, amber and cruel, locked on their hiding place as if scenting the mark's glow, his lips curling in a predator's smile. Betrayal's architect, now come to claim the key that could unmake him. Aldrich's breath hissed, recognition dawning like a blade's edge. "Eric," he growled, the name a curse forged in old blood, his body coiling with the instinct to charge. But he held, hand tightening on her arm, the touch a tether amid the rising storm within him. Guilt flashed across his features, illuminated by the moon's crimson wash, the plague's failure, not his alone, but a web spun by this traitor, yet he'd borne the weight in solitude, exiling himself to atone for what mercy couldn't touch. Now, with Tamsin's gift revealed, the past clawed back, his pack's ghosts howling for vengeance, the realm's balance teetering on whether he'd wield her light as weapon or let it burn free. The hunters closed in, boots thudding like war drums, hounds foaming at the jowls with the scent of lunar blood. Eric raised a gauntleted hand, his voice booming across the snowfield, laced with mocking silk. "Fen, the mountain hermit reveals himself at last, and with a prize, an omega marked by your folly. Hand her over, and perhaps I'll spare the memories of your failures." Laughter rippled through his men, cruel and echoing. But Tamsin felt the undercurrent. Fear, masked. Her sigil flared hotter, visions cascading, Eric's own hidden rot, a curse root scar festering in his gut, devouring him from within. The irony of his hunt for healing he denied others. Aldrich stepped forward, shielding her fully, his frame a bulwark of resolve and torment. The wind whipped his cloak, carrying the metallic tang of drawn steel as Eric's men fanned out, encircling the defile. "You poison my kin, Draven," Aldrich roared, voice cracking the night like thunder, the moon casting his shadow long and fierce. "Twisted the goddess's gifts into chains. This ends here, not for glory, but for the mercy you spat upon." His eyes met Tamsin's over his shoulder. A plea and a promise, the ethical storm raging. War would claim blood, forgiveness a fool's path, yet love, for that was what this bond whispered, demanded he choose her freedom over his vengeance, her light unbound. Tamsin rose, the sigil blazing now, illuminating the snow in radiant arcs that made the hunters recoil, their eyes widening in superstitious dread. She stepped beside him, hand outstretched, light pouring from her palm like molten silver, weaving toward Eric. Not attack, but probe, the mark's empathy seeking the traitor's fracture. Pain lanced her, visceral as birthing thorns, his ambition born of his own rejection, a bastard alpha scorned by greater houses, turning to curses for power. "You hunt what you fear," she called, voice steady despite the ache, the wind tearing at her words. "Healing isn't yours to chain. Let it go, or it consumes you." Eric snarled, lunging forward, blade flashing under the blood moon. But Aldrich met him, their clash a symphony of steel and fury, sparks flying like stars, blood spraying hot against the cold. The hounds surged, but Tamsin's light flared. A barrier of lunar fire that singed fur and sent them yelping into retreat. Her gift held, mending a gash on Aldrich's arm mid-fight, threads of warmth knitting flesh, even as she staggered, the effort drawing her own strength like a tide. Around them, the confrontation unfolded. Two of Eric's men fell to Aldrich's precise strikes, not killing, but disabling, mercy's echo in his blows. Yet Eric pressed, his sword grazing Aldrich's side, crimson blooming on wool, the scent thick and coppery. Tamsin cried out, the sigil pulsing in agony, her vision splitting the veil. The choice crystallized, moral and merciless. Pour her light into Aldrich, binding them deeper in love's redemption, or withhold, granting him freedom to end this in war's brutal absolution, her own liberty in solitude's shadow. Forgiveness for Eric's soul, twisted as it was, or the cycle of blood eternal. The moon watched, indifferent, as blows landed and snow churned to red slush, the wind carrying weavos of the fallen packs, demanding her verdict. Aldrich glanced back, blood-streaked and fierce, his eyes begging not victory, but her heart's truth, love as proof, not prize, in this crucible of past and peril. Irik's blade rose for the killing arc, and Tamsin's hand extended, light surging not in wrath but offering, the dilemma's edge cutting deep, compassion's crown or war's throne. The night held its breath, blood and moonlight mingling in judgment's forge. The blood moon's crimson veil thickened the air, turning each breath into a sip of iron and frost as Tamsin's light arced toward Eric, not a lance of destruction, but a thread of probing silver seeking the rot at his core. The wind tore through the defile like a vengeful spirit, whipping snow into stinging veils that blurred the clash of steel and shadow. Aldrich staggered under Eric's onslaught, his side weeping red where the blade had kissed flesh, the metallic tang blooming sharp and visceral against the pine-scented gale. Yet even in pain, his strikes held mercy's restraint, disabling sweeps that felled 2 more hunters to the snow, their groans muffled by the drifts, not silenced by death. Tamsin's heart twisted, the sigil on her skin a furnace now, drawing her essence into the fray, mending Aldrich's wound from afar with threads of warmth that knit muscle and staunched the flow. But the effort hollowed her, knees buckling against the quartz-veined rock, visions fracturing the night into shards of truth and torment. Irik recoiled from her light, his amber eyes widening, not in fear, but feral calculation. The curse-root scar in his gut pulsing under her empathetic gaze, a festering void, black as the ambition that had birthed it. At 35, he was a monument to betrayal's forge, bastard-born, scorned by elder houses, his rise paved with poisoned wells and stolen oaths. The plague on Aldrich's pack had been his masterpiece, a calculated venom to shatter a rival healer king, claiming fen lands for Draven's iron grip. Now her mark unveiled it all, the web of shadows he'd spun across the realm, bending lesser healers to brew curses for his wars, turning the goddess's mercy into chains of control. "Witch light," he snarled, voice a guttural rasp, slicing the wind, his blade arcing back toward Aldrich, who parried with a grunt, blood flecking the snow like scattered rubies. "You'll not unravel me with parlor tricks, Omega. Your glow is Fen's folly, his seed, his shame. Yield it, or watch him bleed for your delusions." Tamsin's vision sharpened on Eric's fracture, the sigil amplifying the moral chasm yawning before her. Forgiveness for this architect of loss. A balm that might dissolve his poison and spare the realm further blood, or war's unyielding hammer, letting Aldrich's vengeance claim the traitor and free her from the bond's insistent pull. Love or liberty, his oath-bound heart or her wandering soul, unclaimed by pack or promise. The wind howled a dirge, carrying echoes of the plagued dead, their weavos faint but insistent. Ghosts demanding justice from the peaks. She rose unsteadily, light coiling from her fingertips like smoke from embers, the moon's crimson gaze boring into her back, urging revelation over retribution. Aldrich glanced her way mid-parry, his gray eyes stormy with conflict, guilt's old chains clashing against the redemption she offered, his body a shield even as it faltered, the wound's ache seeping into their shared pulse. "You built your throne on mercy's grave," Tamsin called, her voice carrying clear and unbroken through the gale, laced with the sigil's unyielding truth. The light extended, brushing Eric's scarred arm, not wounding but illuminating, the curse root's barbs retracting slightly under lunar fire, a whisper of cure that made him hiss in mingled rage and reluctant awe. His men hesitated, circling warily, their steel glinting like frost-kissed thorns, the hounds cowering from her radiant barrier. "The plague wasn't fate. It was your fear, Eric. Scorned, you poisoned what you couldn't claim. But healing isn't dominion. It's choice. Let me mend it or carry your rot to the end." Eric laughed, a hollow bark that dissolved into a cough, blood flecking his lips as the vision pierced deeper. His own hidden exile, a youth cast from his sire's hall, debts of blood repaid in curses that now devoured him. He lunged again, blade whistling, but Aldrich countered with a healer's precision, twisting the strike aside and driving an elbow into Eric's ribs, the impact cracking bone with a wet snap. The rival alpha stumbled, clutching his side, amber eyes locking on Tamsin with a predator's desperate gleam. "Mend? You'd unmake my empire for a hermit's guilt?" He spat into the snow, the crimson mixing with moonlight's stain. "Fen forsook his pack for solitude. Let him watch you fall as they did." The words struck Aldrich like a fresh blade, his posture sagging for a heartbeat. The ghosts of his kin rising in his gaze, faces pale and twisted by fever under that harvest moon long ago. Tamsin's chest ached with echoed pain, the sigil bridging their torments. His self-imposed exile a mirror to her pack's rejection, both fleeing bonds that terrified them. She stepped forward, light surging to envelop Aldrich fully now, sealing the gash on his side with a warmth that spread through her like liquid fire, visceral and intimate, their breaths sinking amid the chaos. Empathy flooded her, his melancholy a vast frozen sea, duty's weight crushing what desire had briefly thawed that tavern night. To bind with him was to shatter his vows, turning love into the very chain he feared. To release him was to embrace solitude anew, her gift a solitary flame in the realm's gathering dark. Eric rallied, signaling his remaining men, 3 shadows closing in with opportunistic snarls, blades drawn for the kill. The defile erupted in frenzy, steel clanging like thunder, snow churning to bloody slush under boots and paws. Tamsin wove her light as a shield, tendrils lashing out to disarm one hunter, the glow searing his gauntlet without scarring flesh, mercy's edge in every pulse. Aldrich fought like a storm contained, his movements a dance of atonement, felling Eric's second with a sweeping kick that sent the man tumbling into the drifts, unconscious but breathing. Yet the rival pressed Aldrich back toward the defile's lip, a sheer drop to icy ravines below, the wind's moan rising to a scream. In that crucible, Tamsin's choice crystallized, spiritual and searing. Pour her essence into Eric's cure, risking Aldrich's peril for compassion's gamble, or fuel the bond with Aldrich, deepening their union to end the threat in war's finality, liberty sacrificed on love's altar. The sigil blazed, illuminating the snowfield in silver-crimson waves, the moon's light fracturing on quartz veins like tears on stone. Eric's blade rose, poised for Aldrich's heart, and Tamsin extended both hands, one toward the traitor, offering forgiveness's fragile light, the other clasping Aldrich's blood-slick palm, the contact igniting their shared pulse into a roar. Pain lanced her core, the dilemma's forge burning away doubt. Strength was not vengeance's blade, but mercy's quiet crown, chosen amid the blood and howls. Eric faltered, the light coiling into his scar, unraveling the curse root's hold with a sizzle of ethereal fire. His body convulsing, not in death but rebirth, the rot yielding to lunar grace. He collapsed to his knees, gasping, eyes wide with the horror of his unmasked soul, the wind carrying his ragged confession like smoke. His men froze, blades lowering in superstitious retreat, the hounds slinking into shadows. Aldrich turned to her, chest heaving, his free hand cupping her face amid the settling flurry, the touch of vow unspoken. Love as proof, redemptive and raw. His oath fracturing under the weight of what they'd forged. Yet as Eric rose, trembling but unbroken, the night whispered of deeper trials, forgiveness granted, but the realm's shadows far from quelled, their bond now a beacon for greater wars. Tamsin's knees gave, the sigil dimming to embers, exhaustion crashing like waves on frozen shores. Aldrich caught her, his embrace a harbor of warmth and lingering torment, the blood moon dipping toward dawn's edge, staining the snow with promises yet unclaimed. The choice hung between them, ethical and eternal. Had mercy crowned them, or merely delayed the fall? The blood moon's crimson faded to bruised indigo as dawn clawed at the horizon, its pale fingers bleeding through the iron spine veil, turning the snowfield into a canvas of thawing scars. Tamsin slumped against Aldrich's chest, the sigil on her side a spent ember, its silver veins retracting like frost under sun, leaving her skin raw and etched with faint, luminous traces. Exhaustion wrapped her like chains forged in the night's forge. Visceral, bone-deep, the cost of Mercy's gamble pulsing in her temples with each labored breath. Eric knelt in the churned slush, his body racked by aftershocks, the curse root's barbs dissolved into ethereal mist that curled skyward, swallowed by the wind's retreating howl. His amber eyes, once sharp as daggers, now dulled with the weight of unveiled rot, stared at the ground where his blade lay discarded, half buried in red-flecked white. His men had fled into the gathering light, shadows scattering like wolves chastised, the hound's whines fading into the ravines below. Yet victory tasted of ash. The air hung heavy with the coppery reek of blood and the mineral bite of exposed earth, the realm's fractures bared but not mended. Aldrich's arms encircled her, a bulwark of warmth amid the chill that seeped from the stones. His own wound sealed by her light, but throbbing with the echo of old guilts. At 39, he was a landscape of endurance, scars like mountain ridges, his frame unyielding, yet trembling with the quake of revelation. The plague's architect humbled before them, not by blade, but by the very mercy he'd scorned, unraveled the solitude he'd clung to like a shroud. His breath ghosted her temple, ragged and scented with sage and iron, the pendant at his throat, a silver crescent, catching the first dawn gleam, its runes humming faintly against her cheek. "You chose," he murmured, voice a low thunder cracked by wonder, his hand tracing the sigil's fading outline through her cloak. "Compassion over the blood I craved. What is strength if not this, releasing the chain that bound us both?" Tamsin's throat tightened, tears freezing on her lashes as the wind sighed through the defile, carrying the distant weevo of awakening packs, a chorus of rebirth under the moon's departing watch. Her body ached with the outpouring, Eric's poison drawn into her like venom from a wound, leaving her hollow. The Pathfinder's gift, a double-edged blade that had forged her from exile's dregs into something sacred, yet perilous. Rejected at 18 for visions deemed madness, debts herding her through shadowed taverns and fevered nights, she'd knocked on his door not as savior, but supplicant. Now, the mark bound them in ways no oath could sever, that anonymous union under harvest light, a desperate balm, had seeded this power, her blood awakening his redemption. But love's proof demanded more than survival. It required surrender, the ethical precipice where freedom dissolved into union, her wandering soul yielding to the Alpha's melancholic heart. Eric rose unsteadily, his cloak torn and bloodied, the rival sigil on his armor dulled to tarnish. He met her gaze, not with snarl but a fractured nod, the wind tugging at his dark hair like fingers of absolution. "The rot! It's gone," he rasped, voice stripped of command, laced with the raw edge of a man reborn in defeat. "You've unmade what I built on lies. The realm will know. Draven falls, but the shadows. They'll hunt your light." He turned, limping toward the ravine, his form a silhouette against the dawn, leaving his blade as offering or omen. No pursuit, Mercy's gift had hollowed his ambition, planting seeds of doubt in the empire of curses. The snow around him steamed faintly where her light had touched, a symbol etched in melt. Forgiveness as the true healer, not Dominion's grasp. Aldrich's grip tightened, pulling her closer, the heat of his body chasing the dawn's creeping cold, his scent enveloping her like pine smoke and hearth fire. The sigil stirred anew, not in blaze but gentle pulse, sinking to his heartbeat, a visceral rhythm that echoed through her veins, mending the hollows her choice had carved. Visions flickered, softer now. Not plague's horror, but futures woven in moonlight. Hands joined over a realm's wounds, Pax gathering under lunar grace, her exile transmuted to queenship beside him. Yet doubt lingered, spiritual and searing. Was this union redemption, or sacrifice veiled as destiny? Her Pax rejection had taught her liberty's bitter edge, his vows, the peril of bonds that turned mercy to chains. "The oath," she whispered, tilting her face to his, the first light gilding his gray eyes with gold, illuminating the melancholy lines of a king long in hiding. "It forbids this, us, what we become. It demands your solitude, my freedom." He cupped her face, thumb brushing her lower lip with a tenderness born of resisted longing, the touch igniting sparks along her nerves, raw and intimate. The wind fell silent, the peaks standing sentinel as dawn broke fully, painting the snow in hues of rose and steel. "Vows without heart are hollow altars," he said, voice resonant with the north's ancient timbre, guilt's shadow lifting like mist under sun. "The goddess marked you through me, not as curse, but call. I've healed the realm in isolation, but you've healed the healer. Love isn't reward, Tamsin. It's the choice to embrace the break, to let blood and moonlight bind what exile tore asunder." His lips met hers then, not in haste, but deliberate union, a kiss tasting of salt and sage, the sigil blooming warm between them, threads of light weaving from her skin to his, sealing the fracture of pasts in a shared rebirth. She melted into him, the world's weight dissolving in that press, her fears of rejection, his chains of duty, forged into something unbreakable, lunar and eternal. The mark hummed, a final revelation. Strength lay in this yielding compassion crowning the fallen, her hidden gift no longer solitary, but amplified in their bond. Dawn's light bathed them, the iron spine awakening with birdsong and the faint crack of thawing ice, symbols of Renascimento amid the bloodied snow. Enemies scattered, but greater trials loomed, the realm's shadows drawn to their light, wars of curse and cure yet to unfold. Yet in this moment, under the moon's fading gaze, they stood reborn. Omega and Alpha, exile and king, love's proof etched in flesh and fate. The wind stirred once more, a gentle exhalation carrying the scent of fresh pine and distant blooms, whispering of paths ahead, union as sacrifice, healing as the ultimate cure, their hearts beating in defiant harmony against the gathering dawn. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.